Matters with Paul Rosen.
Our diets, our Western diets in America are just really, you just don't realize how poor they really are.
What would you say to others who would like to feel better?
Sometimes you need to find the instruction. That's where the testing and everything comes in, because without that knowledge, there's no way I could have got to the point where I'm at today.
Straight talk about health.
And then I start preaching and telling them what I've been doing. And this guy named Paul Rosen has changed my life.
With your host, Paul Rosen.
By the way, the information contained in this program is not approved by the FDA, nor intended to treat, diagnose, or claim to cure any medical condition or disease as defined by Western medicine. However, skilled practitioners of many disciplines have found nutrition response testing to be a highly reliable supportive technology for assessing the health and fitness of the body's functional system.
Okay, Paul, what's all this about ADD, ADHD? Are we looking at some kind of national epidemic or something?
Or something.
Or something.
Well, the bottom line is that the psychiatric profession, and close your ears if you don't want to hear somebody dance on the psychiatric profession, because and that is that they tend to want to classify every type of human behavior as some sort of disease, and things like oppositional defiance disorder.
I have no idea what that is.
Well, you can just.
You can parse it out.
You can parse it out from the title.
Mm-hmm.
A math disorder.
A math disorder.
Yeah.
So I think where you're going with this, Paul, and you can cite more examples, I suppose, but basically, as you said, it's common human behaviors that some want to classify as some kind of disorder,
and have.
Okay.
And it's a way to try to legitimize, Now, before I get too crazy about this, there's no doubt that people have difficulty and emotional imbalances are commonplace on the planet, and some extremely severe and some so severe that they create a condition whereby the individual suffering from them, may want to take their own life or do harm to somebody else. So, yes, there's an issue, and one has to deal with that. I mean, there are the sociopathic types. One has to deal with that. The problem is when you have a complicity between the big pharma and the psychiatric profession in creating a pharmacopoeia, a massive amount of medications, which in and of themselves have been proven, have been shown to create certainly as much, in some people's minds, more harm than good. One really has to start to take a look. Is there an alternative? Is there a way that you might be able to address these issues before you take a dive into the deep end of big pharma?
So let's summarize here, Paul. According to you and according to others, I'm sure, it looks like the psychiatric profession is maybe unduly diagnosing some human behaviors as disorders or mental illnesses, and the pharmaceutical companies are, in turn, making medications available to treat those so-called illnesses.
Make them up. Make up the tool to treat it. It's a great business model. It's a great business model.
Is it possible, though, that within that realm there are those who are conscientious? They are trying to come up with solutions for what they see as things that need to be cured.
It's certainly possible, but the question is the cure worse than the condition?
Aha, there's the rub right there. Right. So we have all these medications out there probably creating more problems than they are meant to solve.
So let's just focus down on the ADD, ADHD.
All right.
The symptoms that are associated with these conditions, both inattentive type and what they call hyperactive or impulsive type, include things like a person failing, a child or an adult failing to give close attention to details or makes careless mistakes. Think about the symptoms here.
Okay, I'm thinking about that, which may
has
include
difficulty sustaining attention, does not appear to listen, struggles to follow through on instructions, has difficulty organizing or with organization, avoids or dislikes tasks requiring sustained mental effort.
Now, before you continue, Paul, everything you've just mentioned there sounds to me like it could be just somebody who lacks focus. Not somebody who has a mental illness so much, but just somebody who needs to learn better habits.
I didn't pay him, folks, for that.
Okay. That's where you were going, too, I
Is
suspect.
easily distracted, is forgetful in daily activities.
Those are all trained behaviors, everything you've just mentioned.
So that's primarily the inattentive type. Here is the hyperactive impulsive type.
Mm-hmm.
Fidgets with hands or feet or squirms in a chair. Has difficulty remaining seated. Sounds like your kindergarten or first grade class, right?
Right.
Runs around or climbs excessively. Has difficulty engaging in activities quietly. Acts as if driven by a motor. Talks excessively, blurts out answers before questions have been completed. In other words, is interrupting. Has difficulty waiting or taking turns. Interrupts or intrudes upon others.
Before you continue, Paul, let me interrupt. That's just like an alpha personality, though. I mean, we call it hyperactivity, and maybe there's somebody out there who wants to give you medicine for it, but that's just somebody who is a little too focused, a little too driven. And I noticed, too, there may be some overlap here.
Absolutely.
You could have one thing from the one category, the ADD category, where maybe you are kind of inattentive. On the other hand, you could also be that fidgeting sort of fella.
So your endocrine system has certain glands which do have an impact on your emotional condition, your endocrine system, such as your thyroid, your adrenals, in particular. And the behaviors which are being described here are largely impacted by a thyroid which is not happy.
So there may be a physiological...
There is definitely a physiological connection, but the pharmaceutical companies and the psychiatric profession would want you to believe that these behaviors are the result of chemical imbalance. Now, as a technical point, probably every aspect of a human being has some chemical connection, because the biochemistry of the body is essential in order for a human organism to function at all. So technically speaking, right, there is a biochemical connection. However, what the drugs are attempting to do is to affect certain chemistry by saying there are deficiency of things like, serotonin or dopamine or things like that. The drugs that are being prescribed for this ADD, ADHD are amphetamine-based. Yes, I see the brow furrowing.
Yeah, you saw that reaction from me, so that doesn't sound good to me. That sounds unhealthy.
Indeed. So the drugs, many of them, and I don't want to go into all of them, but many of them are basically amphetamine-based. Now, don't we have an amphetamine, sort of a big issue?
Yes,
here
we do.
In the United States, some kind of, overwhelming, what the heck is going on?
In the big picture, Paul, what we're seeing in some economically depressed areas in particular, people are over-medicating. They're looking for ways out of their situation. It's not so much a physiological issue as a means of escape, and that includes opiates, which you've talked about on this show before, and other things, methamphetamines, and maybe prescription drugs like
Adderall.
Okay, good.
I mean,
this is
a typical, these are just some of them, Adderall and Concerta, and of course there's Ritalin, and that's the one most noted for. I mean, I was given Ritalin as a kid.
You were. It
Yes.
goes back that far.
Yes.
And that's not a knock
now,
on
folks,
your age.
you understand, you were right. I am, no.
And Ritalin is supposed to settle down hyperactive kids, is that right?
And as I recall, the effect on me was literally not just to slow me down, but to make me almost comatose.
Right. And that doesn't seem to be conducive to learning to me. Maybe you'll get that kid to settle down.
The side effects, for example, of Ritalin are loss of appetite, weight loss, insomnia, headache, dizziness, nervousness, irritability, overstimulation, restlessness, unpleasant taste, dry mouth, nausea, stomachache, diarrhea, constipation, paranoia, addiction, phonetic tics, high blood pressure, increased heart rate, high blood pressure twice.
Okay, Paul, you've gone through that whole list of things that can happen, but with kids in particular, are there any benefits that you can see? I mean, do these drugs actually increase attention or help kids learn? I mean, what's the benefit of any of this?
Go back to the list of symptoms that I read that are descriptive of the ADD or ADHD condition. And then, ironically, listen closely, pay attention to the side effects that are described, associated with, for example, Ritalin. Nervousness, irritability, overstimulation, and restlessness.
But here's my point, Paul. Maybe they get that kid to settle down, and they also unintentionally have those really negative side effects. But is there any benefit at all, aside from the parents and teachers being able to get that kid to settle down? Does the child or the patient, we'll call them, derive any benefit whatsoever?
Well, it depends on your perspective. If you're running a classroom and you're trying to get something accomplished, and you have, an individual or individuals that are so totally disruptive to the atmosphere that, it's making it almost impossible to conduct, what you're trying to do with the other students. The question is, how do you deal with that? My issue here is that first and foremost, you want to try an approach which doesn't have any side effects, none whatsoever, and that from my own clinical experience seems to be quite positive with many conditions.
So
are there outliers? Are there some situations, some individuals that might not respond to the nutritional approach? Sure. But more will than won't. And anytime you can limit the exposure to a therapy which is associated with a higher degree of risk, and these psych drugs definitely create a high degree of risk. One of the reasons why even the members of the psychiatric profession are really starting to, find their resistive voice regarding antidepressants and other psychotropic drugs, right, can be summed up in the massacres at Littleton, Colorado, Santee, California, Paducah, Kentucky, and Red Lake, Minnesota. Every one of the kids was on a psychotropic cocktail that started with an antidepressant.
And we should
everyone.
We should add that is a factor maybe with mentally ill children, but probably in those cases and many others, they have other issues going on.
Whether or not they were mentally ill in the beginning, right? And we're of course speculating here, but because I have worked with people, both adults and children, who have been declared or declare themselves based on what they think the ADD and ADHD condition is, put them on a nutritional healing program and watched their behavior change and the way they think about themselves change. My recommendation is find yourself someone who can provide you with a personalized nutritional healing program first and foremost, and start, by the way, as you hear me say every weekend, start by eliminating sugar from your diet.
We've talked about this in terms of children mostly, Paul, up to this point, but adults also suffer from ADD, ADHD. Is that correct?
Well, again, we're the way you're talking about it is the way the psychiatric profession would love to have people talk about it.
So what do you mean by that?
It's a disease.
Well, I'm not trying to do that. I'm just referring to it as a matter of fact. These are issues that some people deal with.
They do, but whether or not they're a disease is still a discussion to be had.
Okay,
the behaviors, when I read the behaviors of those two conditions to you, your response, uncoached, was, what? I mean, those sound like, kind of normal situations, people manifesting those behaviors. Those are human beings, it sounds like to me.
Yeah, but somebody, just to play devil's advocate with myself and you, somebody else may say, well, we've accepted that for generations, that these are normal human behaviors that need to be managed by each of us individually, and we need to deal with others who are engaging in those behaviors. Others may say we're well past the time that we should recognize these are not normal behaviors. These are mental illnesses that need to be treated, perhaps with medication.
And your point? I mean, that's obviously what's happened.
Okay.
And, I think that does a huge disservice to a human being, especially if it's a child, right? Especially if you're feeding them foods which we absolutely know with 100% certainty are creating the behaviors that are supposedly abnormal or a pathology, right? And then hanging the kid out to dry. Here, by the way, here's your gummy bear vitamins. Here's your Pop-Tarts and your Cocoa Puffs and Fruit Loops. Here's your sodas. And when you're really good, we'll give you a candy bar, right? And then on the other hand, saying, "Oh my gosh, you're out of control. So what you need is some pharmaceutical." To me, that's insidious.
I wonder, too, if, and I guess I can stop wondering because it's a matter of fact, you may have children who exhibit these behaviors early on, and basically they just carry it into adulthood because they continue with those bad habits throughout the course of their lives. And maybe if it's somebody who's just unmanageable, who's always hyperactive, the way we deal with it culturally is just to avoid that person. It's not somebody we want to deal with.
I'm going to issue a challenge to anybody listening who has children or knows of children that would be exhibiting some or all of these symptoms. Cut sugar out of their life. Just cut it out. Just start with that. Cut sugar out of their life. Let me know what happens after a couple of weeks.
Yeah. I think...
Now, having said that, for most kids, there are going to be some additional issues that need to be addressed. And you've heard me say this every program. Those are the barriers to healing. Does this child have food sensitivities? Are they sensitive to chemicals? Most are. The typical preservatives, colorings, additional taste enhancers. And then children, of course, who have suffered from things like asthma or colic or ear infections or things like that, who have been just pounded severely with antibiotics or antihistamines or prednisone type products, and then they have behavioral issues. Oh my gosh.
One more note, you can get a free chapter of Paul Rosen's book, The Missing Piece. Just go to his website, acunatural.com, acunatural.com, and fill out the dialog box that pops up. Rest assured, no information you provide will ever be shared with anyone else. So, what are you waiting for? Get going on your personal road to wellness today.